think about God that I now say, yeah, I was wrong about. I used to have a lot of judgment about religion and Christianity, thinking like, it's not bad, but it's like, dude, that's so outdated and like, get with it. Why are you religious when you could be spiritual? And along with that, I became very inundated in the spiritual movement. So like spirituality, not religion, like the evolved thinkers are spiritual, not religious. They're also evolved enough to always have to tell you that they're spiritual, not religious. That was me.
Well, welcome back, guys. We are here today with a new guest, Dave, who's actually always been with us in spirit. He's always been our behind-the-scenes producer of thumbnails to editing our sound to really helping us make this podcast better than what we could do ourselves.
Yeah, Dave's definitely an iron disciple. He's
Yeah.
out there like Paul, removed from Jerusalem, out there in crazy places.
Well, I love it.
Welcome, Dave.
Yeah, thank you. I love being a part of this.
Dave.
It's awesome.
We got him moving down here in what, a month now?
Yeah, a little over a month.
And he'll be in studio here soon. He's up in Minnesota. But yeah, so today we're looking at a video JP Sears put out. I think probably a lot of people are pretty familiar with him just because of kind of like if you're conservative in politics, he kind of makes a lot of satire content in that world. And I think before he was in that space, you kind of knew him as making these funny YouTube videos where he's this kind of hippie looking dude making fun of like yoga people or coconut oil and stuff like that.
The New Agers.
Yeah, he fit that role really well. And so this video he put out is what's it called? I Changed My Mind About God. And we thought it'd be a good video to just go through today because he has some just it's a great view of a man changing his mind, and then he providing like good wisdom, like his wisdom he provided out of it as a new Christian. I thought was amazing. But yeah.
Absolutely. I've been following JP for years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like even when his very beginning and with all of his humor and his comedy and like him and his wife just like searching and being honest people. So seeing this is really, really cool. And I saw a couple videos he put out, I don't know, sometime around November or October last year. And he was hinting at it. He was using God more and talking about, this conversion was on its way. So one thing I love about JP and always have is like when I followed him back in like 2016 or, the earlier, like when he was coming out and he was really just kind of poking fun at his own beliefs because he was coming out of like this new age type of thing. And he's always been pretty critical and self-critical of like, this makes sense, but doesn't really make sense. Like, sort of the double standards that appear within the lifestyle that comes along with being like spiritual. You kind of pick and choose, right? And also very judgmental on other people, which is a lot of his satire is from that. It's because it'll be like, oh, I'm better than you because of this, but at the same time I'm doing this. And it was hilarious because I think a lot of people at the time were going through that. I know I'd been through it in like a little late, like 2010, 11. And it just becomes apparent, and if you're insulated with a bunch of people that are yes men and, that are along for the ride, I think there were a bunch of, that's why his channel got so much attention, is because a lot of them were like, yeah, there's some gaping holes in all of this. And you might as well have someone and poke humor at it. Cause I think humor is the best way to kind of do that for people. Cause it's not like you're attacking them, but you're having fun with it. And they're able to kind of come to ideas themselves through humor. It's a great way of learning. It's a great way of kind of getting into those more tender subjects, I think, for a lot of people.
Dave, how long have you been listening to JP?
I mean, to be quite honest, I don't follow him a ton, but I see him a lot, pop up in social media, Insta Reels, stuff like that, just seeing a little, satirical clips that he's in. But I mean, I've known about him for a number of years. I will say though, like it's very, very cool to see, someone like him who, he has the money, he has the status, he has the influence, the following, like he's a very popular person. And I think it's just really cool to see someone who is in that position to kind of be able to take a step back and really let themselves, be revealed to what the reality is out there, and be willing to let his mind be changed. And so I think that's cool, because I think there's so many people that do have the status and fame in social media and whatever, where they definitely have the mindset of, I built myself up to this point, like I am God sort of thing. So it is really cool to see this video that we're going to be watching here shortly.
Definitely. Yeah, I don't think many could do that. JP can do that because he's self-critical and he's got the humor, and he's got that since the beginning. Whereas some of those other people that are in those positions, if they show like any type of change in character, they feel like they're going to be their believability and their product, who they are, will be less quality.
We talked about that on the Leader podcast on how, like, I think a good
Credibility. It's like they feel like
sign.
they're losing credibility if they change, or if they grow, or if they evolve, or if something changes and they have to stay like the rise and grind, bro.
Yeah, and he talks about that, being willing to change your mind and admitting when you're wrong is, I think, such a impactful, like, it just gives you credibility.
Absolutely. I agree.
But yeah, let's get this thing started. So we kind of time stamped it out a bit to some of the key points we like. So we'll let it play and then stop it along the way here. So let's get this started.
Think about God that I now say, yeah, I was wrong about. I used to have a lot of judgment about religion and Christianity, thinking like, it's not bad, but it's like, dude, that's so outdated, and like, get with it. Why are you religious when you could be spiritual? And along with that, I became very inundated in the spiritual movement. So like spirituality, not religion, like the evolved thinkers are spiritual, not religious. They're also evolved enough to always have to tell you that they're spiritual, not religious. That was me. And while I was in there, I will honestly say I got a lot of benefit from spiritual teachings, like different teachers, different books, different philosophies. I got a lot of benefit from that. But when I look back, I can see I was excluding some amazing traditional Christian values, beliefs of God, and ways of connecting with God that I now really value. But out of what I would call spiritual arrogance, I was excluding them, just judging them to be, oh, that's old, outdated stuff. And like, nah, y'all need to get spiritual like me. And with that, I didn't believe in the immense power of prayer. I used to think, well, prayer's probably a good thing. It'll maybe give you a more positive mood, a more positive outlook. But I didn't truly believe in the power of prayer, where people are directly asking God for God's support and then receiving that support from God. Yeah, I didn't really believe that it actually happened. And in a minute, I'll get to directly telling you what my beliefs about.
But anyway, I guess as far as this first part, I think him poking at the spiritual but not religious crowd, him being part of that
clip for that one.
Yeah, remember? Yeah. That is a good clip. Yeah, for the context in that, there was he talking to God. Peter was from Family Guy, and then he was basically like, the people that are spiritual but not religious get to go straight to hell, like, and burn.
Yeah. Well, that's because you don't get a stand on anything.
Yeah,
you don't get to be criticized.
You're like riding on the fence for like your whole life.
I'm not anything, therefore you can't come at me, bro.
I mean,
undecided, but I'm everything. I can come at everybody else.
I mean, exactly. That's where like there is a lot of benefits to it, because I think if you are spiritual, you can do a lot of self-reflection and still kind of like analyze yourself and be self-critical on things. But ultimately, it doesn't matter if spiritualism is all you have; it just falls flat, and there's just it's basically.
But there's a lot of good things, like. Yeah, there's a lot of good things. Like, being in the New Age movement myself, one thing I really loved about it is that they really try to put themselves, well, the idea was as I am everything, everyone is me type of thing. So like they really tried to put themselves in other people's shoes, and, they were very environmentally aware. Like they wanted the world to be taken care of. They wanted to eat better. They wanted to like spend time on things that I think a lot of like they would look at Christians didn't view as valuable. Like I said, such as like eating properly, or taking care and getting in touch with nature. And then also like seeing people as like being connected, very connected, very, very connected, as almost too far where they didn't see an individuality within anybody. But those are some great things that I think you can extract from the spiritual movement. And like he said, there's a lot of good things that you can extract and that he got through the philosophies and that are there.
Yeah.
But ultimately, there are some missing pieces. Definitely. I would say from my memory, when I think back to my New Age days, because we came from a Christian background, and I was trying to like really think like what made it attractive was they tell you to be unique in your person. You need to discover that uniqueness by experiencing things, so you have more of an open mind with regard to like drugs, adventure, friends, ways people handle themselves. And that in itself, actually, in the very beginning is nice, because in the church sometimes people forget you have a very unique relationship with Christ, and the way that you are who you are to Christ and who he is to you is something that you need to put work into. And I remember I did carry that over from the New Age. I was like, this is a personal relationship. The relationship with Christ is personal. It's not something like a cookie cutter. I'm going to be like everybody at church, or I'm going to do everything else like this kind of, like minions thing. And that part of it was cool because it allowed me to find out what made me unique, and respect the uniqueness in others too. If somebody has a singing voice that's different, or somebody's expressing their joy to the Lord in a way that, might be offensive to you, but it's just the way they're doing it, to tolerate them and encourage them, not look down on them, or, give them some of those judgmental glances, So that was a cool thing for sure.
Let's roll back into this.
God now are. But first, what changed me? What happened? What I see that changed my mind? Well, one observation I've had over the past 3 years, especially, was hashtag pandemic. Over the past 3 years, I've found myself accidentally getting more Christian. Like without even intentionally trying, like setting out on a mission, like, hey, I want to become more Christian. It's just been effortlessly happening for me. Now, I don't think I'm unique there, because I've seen a lot of people and I've heard a lot of people telling me similar stories. So I asked the question, why are people getting more Christian without even trying? Here's what I believe to be true about that. The presence of evil and Satan that evil emanates from has never been more obvious, at least in my lifetime. The past 3 years, evil isn't hiding anymore. It's coming at us through authoritarianism, movements, people, groups, companies, governments, trying to invade our minds, invade our God-given free will. So as that's become more obvious, I think there's a natural polarity that happens. If you're not someone who's willing to do the devil's bidding, if you're not someone who's willing to propagate evil, then there's a natural occurrence that happens. When you're in the presence of evil, you polarize to the other extreme. Like you may not even be consciously aware of it, but the presence of evil makes you lean away. And then, therefore, what direction are you leaning towards? Well, that would be the direction of God, certainly the opposite of evil, the opposite of Satan. So I think that's seeing the presence of evil. That's why I've just accidentally been getting more Christian, why so many other people are. Because right now, I think the evil that's in this world is doing a great service of driving a lot of people to find God in ways that they previously hadn't.
I think that's a good stopping point, because I think it applies in a lot of areas. Not only what he's talking about, I think, with the pandemic and whatnot, but even some of the red pill stuff, I think we talk about. Like, there's a lot of guys that are not Christian, very secular, but want traditional kind of Christian values out of relationships. And so I think you see that kind of a lot across the board in many different areas and facets of life, which is a great thing. You know, it always comes down to, like we say, that you know, the atheists and whatnot, they borrow Christian values in their life,
Absolutely.
and yeah,
Yeah. I like the way that he said, like accidentally almost, or like without him knowing he was kind of getting into it. And it seems genuine. I feel like those types of people are more inclined to understand like the value than like if you, a lot of some of the other faster conversions are, because they're real. They take time. Relationships take time. Study takes time. Doing your due diligence takes time. When you're going and confronting your questions in your brain of like whether or not you want to believe something, why is this not right? Why don't I feel good about this? Okay, then you go down that little rabbit hole, find your answer, and be critical in your thinking. And that type of intelligence doesn't occur quickly. You have to let things simmer. You have to give time to it. And I really like the way he said that. And I really have, I believe those types of, I guess, conversions, and whether that is to religion or to whatever it may be, are the better ones. I always say slow and steady wins the race, and JP, the other JP, Jordan Peterson, talks about in his clinical research is like, you could, or his clinical work with people, his clients, he's like, the answer many times being a psychologist of what to do with this person. And, many times most of the time, if you want them to actually implement it, the trick is to get them to come up with that themselves, the solution themselves. You can't give them the solution. It doesn't feel like it's possible if you give someone a solution. They have to. So what he would do is get them to ask questions so that they would arrive at the solution themselves, feeling like they had found it first
mm-hmm.
and discovered it for themselves. And that's the way a lot of Christians do not lead their lives. They're like, here's the answer, here's what to believe, here's what to do, here's how to do it.
Mhm.
And that's not going to lead to a great, I believe, conviction, because it's not the person's personal journey.
Right.
It's not giving any credit to it. It's a nice little, people love those Band-Aids, that 60, 30-day abs shit. But in reality, it's not going to stick. It's not a lifestyle at that point in time. It's still like a diet.
I'd say in addition to that, these days I've heard of a lot of conversions, especially with people with a background of some sort of Christianity. If they grew up with an aunt or an uncle who was a Christian, or maybe they had it in the home, they look at the global dynamics that are happening, like Shannon, for instance, and he starts to piece together how this was, he's seeing that it was in the Bible, or it was, these people were telling him about this before. And so I think recognizing what evil is, because he's saying you can see evil, right? And that caused that, in order to see evil, you have to have some kind of a conscience that's been sort of manicured in a way to be able to perceive it. Charlie Kirk, or that guy, he's a big political, and he bears down on a lot of these people who are like Charles Schwab and these very evil organizations. But he makes sure to say these people in their hearts probably think they're doing good. And so what that makes me think about myself is that in order for people to look at the global dynamics, politics, what's happening with freedom, they have some kind of a conscience that's been put there. And I'd be interested to know, because if he's New Age, JP is New Age, he probably had some kind of a background with Christianity. And for many, that background is so important, because when they see things start to stack up, it just validates the Christian perspective in a lot of ways, or just even who God is, like God, the fact that there is good and evil. So I think that's really powerful, very, very powerful. And I see a lot of converts these days, just by virtue of the news and the global dynamics, man. I hear about it all the time. I was in the comments looking at this video, and like 80% of the comments were saying the same thing. Like, I found God through looking at the news, basically, and having a problem with it. So I thought that was cool.
I think I like where he talks about like the polarization that's occurring. I certainly think that truth is in our conscious. It's written on our heart. What is right and what is wrong, and then it's up to us to pursue that or not. And I think it's in 2 Thessalonians where Paul is talking about that. Basically, God is, if you're seeking out evil, like the opposite of of truth, like God is going to oblige you in that. That is your free will. He's going to let you do that. And so I think that's, I think he's touching on that point when he's talking about, that polarization of pulling apart, society and that, truth and, goodness versus all the evil that's going on. That's one thing I noticed too in watching this video is he touches actually on a lot of like biblical points, and whether he knows he's touching on them biblically or not, they ring true. And so it's really cool to see.
Yep. God's doing the work in him.
And specifically, we see the coercion to disconnect people from God playing out in all kinds of propaganda, the gender ideology propaganda, where they're attempting to get people to believe that God made mistakes, which is a fascinating way to basically get people to not believe in God, because if you believe in God, you probably believe God doesn't make too many mistakes. Like, hey, look at this junk between my legs. I'm the wrong gender. So they try to teach us your mind, what you want. You are right. God's wrong. God made a mistake. Dude, you're totally right about you should be a woman. God made a mistake. So, there probably is no God. But when we see all this gender ideology stuff that hinges on that principle that if there probably was a God, he wouldn't be screwing up your gender now, would he? We see that coming at our kids all the time. And amongst other devious intentions behind that kind of ideology, I believe one of the principal ones at its core is to disconnect people from their faith in God.
Good spot.
So here's what I believe now. I now look at traditional Christian values with a lot of respect and reverence, and I'm integrating those more into my life. I will make no claims that I'm the world's best Christian or most devoted Christian, but I'm looking at these Christian values and they make way more sense to me now than they previously did. Christian values around faith in God. Christian values around family first. And I now believe that the power of prayer is the most important thing you and I can do.
But yeah, the propaganda side of it with I think is the transgender stuff is, I hadn't thought of that before. But if you accept that ideology, you have to basically accept that God makes mistakes at a very fundamental level, like your entire like sex and gender identity, which would make if you believe God is omnipotent, that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, people would weasel their way out of that one, just saying he gave you a choice. Like you have a blank canvas of a person. He gives you a suggestion with genitalia, like maybe this is what you should be. I see people do that all the time. And the interesting thing that I'm thinking about is like, in the Bible, you read about a seared conscience. And in Proverbs, you'll read about in a man's heart, his ways are good to him, and it really speaks to people not being able to see truth. And I believe that the truth that is revealed to you by virtue of God in your life, like you being honest, is such a gift. And that's the gift that I see that JP always kind of had. Like he always kind of had, like Joe said, this self-reflection, and he wouldn't just, smooth it over or anything. He's like, this exists and it's a short circuit in what we're dealing with. So I think that his sort of rational mind on that is super cool. Like his conscience is intact. He kept it intact. And I think what's present in his product, what he's done is he's cool with being persecuted. He always has been, or sort of being black sheep, so
surprised he's not canceled, actually.
Yeah, man, it's that humor keeps him up.
Yeah,
not too serious. But
that's right. Yeah. It's a tough one because people come out of the womb jacked up, paraplegic, or they have different disorders, Down syndrome, autism. You can come out of the womb pretty messed up, and gender is one of those things that is taking the spotlight and thinking about God making mistakes and whatnot and miracles. God changing your body midlife. I haven't seen it personally, but I know it happened. I know it's happened. There's plenty of it in medical research journals where they have no idea how someone has, cleared cancer out or, gained eyesight back or hearing or, these, and they're miracles. They're unfounded and they don't know why. So
as God, I don't know if like the idea of him making mistakes is something, but God changes and he grows and he's a living person. And in the Old Testament, his mind would be he swayed by say like Lot and not destroying everybody, maybe 10 people, maybe 60 people, maybe just Lot and his family. And then God's like, okay, if you can find me this, then we'll do this. And it's that
I don't
conversation.
think God changes his mind.
Yeah, I don't either.
Well, you think about it.
Because I
he's
bet
talking
like,
to-
but
well,
if you're
he
looking
said, I'm
at,
going to destroy the whole city. And Lot's like, no.
but God already knew the
Well,
answer.
Yeah, he did. So
But
like,
see, that's the idea behind it. It's like he gives you the opportunity to talk to him.
Mhm.
And he says, I'm going to do this. And you don't just go, okay. Because if God doesn't just change his mind, if you know your parents are never going to change their mind, if you grow up, they're never going to change their mind. Dad's never going to change his mind. You're never going to ask him questions.
Mhm.
Because what's the point?
Yeah.
So think about it that way. So God is omnipotent, yes, but he does desire prayer, and that's what he's talking about.
yeah, it's like
communication.
tests of faith. I see those moments as like tests of faith, like especially Abraham with his son. You get like, imagine being in his shoes. It's like, this really makes no sense. This is the son you promised me. You promised me to be the progenitor of all these peoples, and like now you want me to kill my son. All right. And so with Lot, or I think it was Abraham, he was the one who was asked, and Lot ended up being the only dude who was saved. But really, it's kind of a test of faith to see how good are you, Abraham. Are you a good person? Or do you just want to save your own skin? It's like a test of faith to see that Abraham was a good man, that he cared about this horrible, polluted, villainous town enough to even go out and look for somebody, even though he'd been living in there, being persecuted, probably not having the greatest life. But he had enough compassion on these people to at least go search out a few, on behalf of God. So God is like a story and a testimony to Abraham's faith.
It was Lot
That he
and Sodom and
cared.
Gomorrah.
I thought it was Abraham who was being asked, and Lot ended up being the only guy
It's
who
his brother.
came out.
Yeah, it's his brother.
Yeah, or his cousin. I don't know. But the point of the story is either
Yeah.
Lot or Abraham. I'm pretty sure it was Abraham who was asked, but I might be wrong. Maybe it was Lot. They were living in a corrupt city, obviously,
Mhm.
and God said, I'm going to destroy it. And so out of his compassion, out of Lot or Abraham's compassion, he went out and tried to find people that he could save to, possibly if there was one soul in there. And so
So you
it's
see,
like,
this happens a lot with like God's chosen people, the Jews. Then the Gentiles get included. This also happened in with Noah and the destruction of the world. And we're talking about JP here and how we respect him for growth and for changing and doing these things. So, our if we put that in our heart, God, he wants those things, and it's part of his character. And I think that those, like even reading Islam and some of that, God is all powerful, but at the same time, we have a part to play with him
That's
in
right.
that. And I think that's important to him because that's what makes it exciting.
well, JP's conscience is very strong. That's what I see about him that I really admire a lot. I think God gave him that gift.
Yeah.
I want to be honest about this. I used to have shame about saying the word God. Back when I thought like, dude, I'm spiritual, I'm so cool, but not religious. I used to have shame about using the word God, and instead I'd say, oh, the universe or the all-knowing. I'd just create different names, but I actually just meant God. So I'm delighted to say now I have not only no shame about saying God, but I actually have joy in saying God. God. Yeah, that felt pretty good. And then before I share a little perspective on what I think you and I can do to bring more God into our lives and the world around us, I want to do a quick disclaimer because it's something that tripped me up and gave me a negative view about Christianity and God itself. I would look at all the scandals that have happened in the name of religion. I mean, so many wars have been fought based on religion, based on God. There's been so many corrupt scandals. I mean, so many church scandals where it's all about the money. And then, of course, sexual abuse scandals in the Catholic Church. So I would kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater, like, oh, dude, that dirty bathwater. Yeah, if that's what Christianity is, screw that. If that's what God is, screw that. Now I have a much more mature look where I do believe evil goes wherever it can. The devil masquerades as an angel of disguise. So if the devil wants to control people, then a good way for the devil to do that is to find people where they're trying to find God. So I think we certainly need good discernment. And just because something claims to be of God, or a church or a person claims to be of God, I think we need discernment, because the devil masquerades as an angel of light. But now, what I think is a more mature view, I will discern evil from churches, discern evil from God. So I don't have to throw the God baby out with the bathwater, but rather just throw the bathwater out and keep the God, which seems to be much more empowering.
I personally have dealt with that so many times. You know, I remember having, in the beginning when I found my faith as 20, again, you know, like 26, and we were playing in a metal band, you know, and I'd say Jesus or God. And, I was pretty excited about it. I knew that it would be one of those things that was looked down upon, and there's going to be judgment that followed. And most people in that, you know, ethos were just like, man, I feel sorry for you. Like, life probably got so bad that you couldn't figure things out, so now you had to go to God. Like, you're kind of a loser, bro. Like,
Yeah.
I know how hard it must have been for you. You're just one of those, you know, people that had to, now you got your God crutch, you know. And it was hard being able to figure out a way to communicate to those people that all the failures of the church were failures of human beings, of men, of evil intentions and devices that had weaseled their way into a place to deceive people. That's the nature of deception, is you don't know. I mean, when deception is operating and working, you don't know. That's why you have to have discernment. But to hear him say, like, to have that joy when he says God, and to have that in your countenance, in your being as a believer, you know, when you say God or Jesus and you're in that place where you're representing, that's a mini testimony just in your countenance, in your eyes, and the way you express it, and that excitement that people don't, they don't understand how powerful it is, because, you know, that's real to them, you know. So I definitely feel like what JP is saying, especially to his audience, which I know they have a lot of new age, where they prefer words like universe, they prefer words like energy, the creator, oneness, whatever. And it's like, if you give those words enough time, because they're all pretty new, and
You're saying
those people,
God. You're saying God.
well, even then,
Without saying
what
it.
I'm trying to express is
Makes
that
you feel
if
better.
if you take people and they begin using the word universe and all of their societies and representation of conventions that they have, and you give it the time that Christianity has, it will be just as corrupt and have just as many stories along with it to make it seem like a, you know, a shit show, a horrible experience. So it's because it's so fresh and it's so new that we haven't been able to see the deception behind it. So people,
Babies are perfect, dude. They don't lie. They don't steal. They don't do any of that. They haven't grown up enough or matured to become anything
But
human.
I
But
do want to say one last thing of what's so important about the name of God, because I used to get into conversations with people where it's like, we're saying the same thing: universe, energy, it's all the same.
that's not. It's his
And
creation. You're talking about his creation.
you're worshiping creation instead of the creator, right?
Mhm.
And so there's a distinction that needs to be made there, because people will be like, well, you're saying the same thing, but like JP said, it's just outdated. Like, you need to update yourself.
You know, he says outdated, but I know a lot. I talked to some dudes at the gym the other day, and the one dude had like a cross right here, and he had longer hair, and I was like, oh, you know, what's up with that, you know? And he's like, oh, I'm pagan, and I was like, oh, cool.
That's a 180 right there. I love it.
I said, what's up with the cross? And he kind of talked, and he was with this other buddy, and I was just so hypocritical, you know, it's just so hypocritical. And I was like, yeah, everything's hypocritical. Everybody is. It's just part of human nature. But I think a lot of Christians, and what he's really saying, and what a lot of people are saying when they say like outdated, is like a lot of the Christians have trouble reconciling that the faith and the holy wars, the Inquisition, like all this stuff, and like the religion has been used and warped and screwed into different people's agendas that are highly deceptive and that are essentially evil. And then they correlate that with, if that is, then this religion, the baby out with the bathwater, this must not be true, right? And
I personally don't know many Christians who ignore the fact that our vehicle of faith has been used by evil devices, evil people.
It's the idea when you say it's
I-
perfect, God is perfect. These ideas give people the assumption that if it was, then there would be no. It would have a clean track record,
and that's
It would
because
have a
because
perfect
they lack
background
that's
check.
because they lack gospel. They lack, and this is what JP I'm sure had to understand too, is that the representation of Christ in our lives is not that we're perfect now. When God looks down and sees us, he sees perfection because we have salvation. But the process by which we live is by grace, right? So it's, again,
I
it's
say I
a
like
gap.
to view the word as perfecting, because perfect gives an end to time. It's a closed end, because if you change, think about it. If I say it's perfect, if you change one thing about it, will it be perfect anymore? No, it won't. It will not, because it's already perfect. So words like perfect don't come close to describing a living God moving forward and perfecting, and we're getting to know more truth. We're getting to see more of who he is, more of what we're able to do. So when you say perfect, and when people think perfect, they think always was and should be unchangeable, which is not what's going on here.
Well, I think, just to touch on that, because I don't think that definition of perfection being static, because people will say God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And what they're saying is he is the same in the fact that he's infinite, all-knowing, ubiquitous. He is transcendent of all these effects that we would apply perfection to. So in many ways, it's we can't grasp the fact that perfection is beyond us. So for somebody to have that sort of static definition of perfection, they need to update their definition of perfection in relation to God's infinite, specific personhood that's different than ours. They're relating too much human to human rather than human to God.
I think the one thing too, like I hear a lot of people say, Jesus is a cool guy. I like him. I like the things he teaches. And then they look at Christianity, the Christianity that we know of today, and they're like, yeah, I don't want any of that. I see all these bad things that are happening, all these scandals. Of course, like, as you mentioned, Crusades, Inquisition, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's one of the bigger disservices that even like we have done to people who are seeking the truth, is properly expressing the fact that, like, yeah, Christianity has been distorted for man's desires all throughout history. But the truth is actually, like, if you just go straight to the Gospels, like, and you actually learn about Jesus, what he taught, how he lived, that's what Christianity is. And I think that's what JP is realizing, is like all these things that are going on, all these distortions are not what's taught in the Gospels when you look at Christ. And so I think that's what people need to look to, is like literally go to the Bible, go to the source documents, and see for yourself if that's what you want. It would be incredibly...
Yeah, and before the Gutenberg press, no one could read the Bible, really. There was only a select handful of people that could read the Bible before it was printed for most people to know. And even at that time, if you did get a Bible and you were in the early days, that was in the Inquisition. You could get killed for that, because it was a holy document, and it was only meant to be read and understood by holy men. And you can see throughout, for instance, the Holy Wars, they weren't loving their enemies. They weren't loving their neighbors as themselves. They weren't doing these things.
It's a dead giveaway, right?
They were political. They were
giveaway.
political ploys, and they used religion as control over the people to work their agendas out as so often. But that's a really important part. Is like, you're not going to know about this stuff, about like how there's this contradiction within this religion that is seen in this history that's associated with this religion or with this book primarily, because the Catholics did it. I mean, each one of the 100 or 700 sects of Christianity has their own mess ups. So some are bigger than others. But if you do crack open the Bible, if you are critical of it, you're going to go and wait, this doesn't make sense. This isn't aligning. This must have been someone else's idea of what they're going on. Just the same way we warp the Constitution, the laws, and lawyers will go through and get some guy that's a piece of shit off on trial simply because he knows the laws and the loopholes. Doesn't make the law worse. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's incumbent upon us to share the gospel. A lot of people are going to get the gospel from Hollywood, and it's all this corrupt version, and it's always got this hyper focus on the misgivings and everything. that come along with the fact that it's been around for 2,000 years. So it's incumbent upon us. It's always an open door. There's an opportunity when somebody says they're hypocritical. It's like, well, here, take a look. It's not a time to get frustrated. It's a time to express the true gospel. And like Brother David said, open up the source material. Ultimately, that's what did it for all of us, was the fact that we were, getting as close as we could to the intimate relationship that we could using the Bible, prayer, that kind of stuff.
Source material.
Having the right perception on it too. Like I love the phrase that Christianity is a relationship, not a religion. And I think that is what the giant, like the difference he realized is, because when it's a religion, it's a man-made thing. You got man doing its thing, causing wars, whatever, over the religions like we've done forever. But if you view it as a relationship with God, with Jesus, like what men are doing with it is kind of irrelevant, because you're holding on to the truth in that relationship.
Yeah, there's just a hyper focus on the negative. I mean, everybody's going to share the negative thing way quicker than the positive. I mean, all the movies we watch, it's based on drama, and the reason why is because
Survival.
the bad things that happen to you, you need to master, otherwise they'll happen again.
And you'll die.
But what we forget is that the good things, the good representations, they're always going to be taken for granted, just the same way that Jesus was taken for granted by his disciples and his apostles while he was there. It's just the nature of the way life is. So we have to self-arrest ourselves when it comes time to pay attention to things and be like, well, I'm going to put this attention here, and with people who are obstinate to that, God will do the work. He did the work in JP. JP was probably one of the most obstinate people you could probably talk to, take it back 2-3 years about Christianity. Guarantee you. But God will do the work.
Well, now we get to listen to JP has some very, I'd say, good advice.
So here are 4 things that I think you and I can do to bring more God into the world. One is to very intentionally have faith in God. It's hard to allow yourself to be supported by God if you don't believe in God, if you don't actively think about it. But having faith that there is a God, God has our backs, God has a plan, and our job is to be of best service to that plan as possible. So having faith. And then listen. It's one thing to have faith, then it's another thing to listen to God. Because I don't know about you, I've got noise in my mind all the time. I've got my own thoughts, I've got my own ego. Then of course there's all the outside noise coming in. So to be guided by God, I think we need to become very good listeners. What is God's path for me? What's God's encouragement for me? What step am I being guided to take right now in this difficult situation? We've got to learn to listen. And I think listening to God, it's a little bit less to do with our eardrums and much more to do with hearing God from our heart. And at least for me, how the conversation tends to show up is subtle feelings in my heart. When I'm thinking about doing something, oftentimes for me, it's as simple as a sensation of lightness in my heart when it's in my greater good. Or it might be a choice where like, dude, that makes logical sense for me to do, but my heart will have a sense of heaviness to it. It's very subtle and it's very easy for it to be there, but for me not to notice. That's why I find it essential to calm my mind and listen to the sensations of my heart, because I do believe that's how God communicates with us. I think if we're trying to listen to God and the English language and literal words, we're probably going to be waiting a while. Now, if that's how God talks to you, great. Doesn't seem to be how God talks to me or most people. So we got to listen to our heart, because what we're really listening to is who's on the other side of our heart, which I believe is God. And thirdly, about what you and I can do is pray. Pray often. Know when people are in need. Maybe you don't even know them, but pray for them. Pray for yourself. Pray for your family, your circumstances. Pray for other people. Pray for the world at large. And by the way, this might sound weird, but when we look at the evil authoritarians, people I judge to be evil at least, the Klaus Schwabs, the George Soroses, Bill Gates, Biden, Trudeau, it's not that I'm keeping track of who they are, but that's who I think they are. What would happen if we start praying for them? Certainly not praying for their agenda to succeed, but praying for them as the individuals. Because I look at them and what I see is godless people who are driven by their own ego. And I think evil is controlling their ego. So these are maybe people we need to pray for more than anybody else, to have them saved. And by the way, the more they're saved, the more they get God into their lives, which I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But hypothetically, if they got more God into their lives, we save them, kind of saves us too, doesn't it? And fourthly, about what I think you and I can do is doing our best to live a life of service, a service to God's plan, a service to God's guidance for us. And then we also have to realize to do so, to live a life of service, we have to look at our own egotistical wants, our egotistical desires. They even might be authentic desires, but sometimes we have to be willing to abandon those in order to be of service to God. Now, here's a fact. A lot of people would say, dude, you mean not just dedicating my life to, well, me and serving myself, which is kind of narcissism, but how would I ever be happy if I don't do that? Well, I would say, how would you ever be happy if that's all you do? I believe true happiness, fulfillment, and meaning of life absolutely requires us to be of service to a greater good, to contribute to the greater good of other people. I think that is absolutely what's required for us to be happy and fulfilled individuals. Now, not to be confused with the dopamine hits that happen when we gratify ourselves, when we make ourselves feel more significant and certain and in control by just kind of going after our egotistical wants, needs, and desires. We love those dopamine hits. They feel good. They're instant gratification. But that's not happiness. A life of service is what births true happiness. And I think to be of best service to a will greater than ours, we need to think about three things: our thoughts, words, and actions, and what are they aligned with? If we allow our thoughts, words, and actions to be as impeccably aligned as possible with God's guidance, then I think we're doing really well. That means we're someone, we listen, we have faith, we listen, we pray, but we also move our feet. We take action. We take action with our words, our thoughts, and of course then our outward actions. That makes us a three-dimensional being doing our best to act out God's will, being of service. I don't know about you, but I think the world needs a lot more of that. But that's something within our control. We'll never be perfect at, but it's within our control to do our best to be better at.
But yeah, his 4 points. I thought like straight out of like what a mature Christian would say.
It's amazing. Yeah. Some good gospel teachings right there. I mean, like when you read about Paul going from city to city, he's walking, he's praying all the time. You know, I found out something pretty interesting. I shared it at Bible study, but I don't know if you guys remember, but back in those days, the Jews and I think mostly the culture then, they didn't know or didn't make a practice out of reading in their heads. So when they read something, they read it out loud. And when they, prayed, they almost 90% of the time prayed out loud. And so it was like a gospel testimony wherever they went. And that's a lot of the reason why when Paul was in prison and stuff, like everybody ended up being a convert, because like that's all he did was pray. You prayed and sang hymns and stuff like that. So many Christians, they have like that 20 minutes, if they're lucky, during the day where they pray, or maybe even just sing a goofy, weird song about your day to God and glorify him in your own personal freaking way, man. So I couldn't agree more with him. You need to pray more. It's your lifeline. Why wouldn't you?
Yep.
Keeps focus. It's really powerful. I think even a lot of people are noticing that today through meditation. And like he was talking about noise and ego and all these different things that are rolling around your brain, and especially when you get hit with, say, stress from work, stress from family, a brother, someone in need. This can all just affect you in an array of different ways. And it can be a positive thing or it can be a negative thing. And it's all about where you are mentally, spiritually,
and physically a lot of times to be able to handle those issues. But if you're a man of prayer, and I talked about this with a friend this weekend, it was like, even in Juice Merlot's book, The Rape of the Mind, the hardest people to indoctrinate were fanatical religious people.
Can't
They-
break me.
It's really hard to break someone like that. Because when you have these shit show situations, wife, family, whatever, work, stress, and then all of a sudden you're sick, what's going to keep you together? Because your rational mind is going to go, this is horrible, everything's horrible. What do I do to preserve myself? And you have these stress responses that are not going to oftentimes tell you exactly what you should be doing, right? Or how to better affect your emotional state, that stress state, which is oftentimes worse than any one singular thing that's actually happening to you.
It's your daily bread, your spiritual bread. I mean, if you're not fed up, ready to encounter the challenges, then you're gonna break, because you're doing it under your own strength. You can't do it. I wanted to bring up something that I thought was interesting, because I've struggled with this at times when I'm talking to people. Ego, like from a biblical representation, we know what that word really is. It's flesh, right? Ego is flesh. But in comes Freud, and Freud is like, kind of the expression tool of word that we use now is ego. And sometimes I've struggled. I'm like, ego, people get right off the bat. They're like, I know exactly what you're talking about when I hear the word ego. But flesh, they don't really get that. And so I think I'm giving JP some props on that. I think he may have had that discussion in his head, like, should I say flesh or should I say ego? And many times when you're trying to minister, it's good to use a word, at least in the beginning, that people have a basic understanding of, to be able to represent something like flesh, because that's kind of a hard thing to explain. It's like, well, ego is flesh. What is this stuff and how does it work together? And then all of a sudden you're in that lesson. So I think JP did a pretty cool move there by just keeping it simple for people. They get the message, So
That's important. A lot of Christians try to speak Christianese to people.
it's a little much sometimes.
Good luck with that.
I mean, you want to get them there. You want to get them into the place where the language is pure, right? Because that's our fight as the Iron Disciples, largely in Bible study, is preserving meaning. I mean, God is the Logos. It's all about the word and the meaning accompanied with it. And Satan has been shooting down and sabotaging and stealing words left and right. And then once those words are dead, there's no way to describe an idea anymore. And wow, you've just won a serious battle.
Because you have no common ground available. There's none.
Well, the Bible has such a refined and specific body of terms that come specifically from the Bible, like grace, mercy, faith, these things. That's where it comes from. And we got to fight for those terms. But sometimes we got to make those maneuvers like ego. When you're talking to somebody who has no idea what flesh is, it's just a good tool to use sometimes. And down the road, you kind of show them, where did this word ego come from? Well, it came from the word flesh. That's where it comes from.
I also liked how he brought up like the servants at life of service. And, you look at these guys, like even rock stars, they have it all, the adulation, and there's still not enough. There's nothing. Our favorite stories are of self-sacrifice. Look at archetypes, the hero archetype. He's the guy that puts his balls on the line for other people. And we tend to hold them in the highest regard. Even look at the Marvel movies. Like, it's over and over. Yeah, they have superpowers, but it's not like they're going and building themselves, like, dominating the world for themselves. What they're doing is they're battling evil for the weaker vessels, so that there's fairness and there's righteousness and there's truth, right? They're not just being evil, which is conquering everyone else for their own good, right? Which brings me right back to like stress situations in your life, right? Or you like where your ego is saying, yeah, just take care of yourself right now. Just take care of yourself right now. Just focus on yourself. You don't have enough energy to do any of this for anyone else. Just block them out, right? It's not about them. It's about you. You're going to die soon. Who knows when anyone's going to die? So, right. So like flip that narrative around, and you'll see how much you're going to get out of life and how much energy you'll get back. Because that's a really lonely, lonely place when you're a shark and you got no friends and you're just chomping everybody. It's not a fun place to be.
Yeah.
And they make it out to be a weak place too, because you just get used, you just get abused. And that's not what we're saying an act of service is. So you have to have discernment. You have to be praying. You have to do these things. You're not a doormat. You're not going to help anyone by being that way. You're not going to help yourself by being that way. It's not that easy to do that, because it's easy to just lay down and let people walk on you.
Right.
It's not that easy. That's not being served. That's not having a heart of service. That's not. Yeah.
It applies to generosity too. Like, are you giving only when you're rich?
Right.
Or are you willing to give when you're lacking yourself?
3 mites. Yeah. Yeah. And I think we struggle with the word service in the church now because we have the servant sort of template that we've talked about this mainly in reference to the red pill movement, where men forget that being of service to somebody is not giving them what they want. It's giving them what they need, and being able to administer rebukes, correction, be a true leader in your household and in the world. That means inviting persecution in sometimes. It's not being a doormat. So that word in of itself, we can see how much damage the world has done that one. Being a service is just being an Oedipal mother, enabling people to do what they want to because now they're happy. And if they're happy, then they've been served well. But we as Christians know better. If somebody's happy, sometimes they're dying inside, and sometimes what they need is a little bit of desert time, like Elijah. That's going to do them some good.
Yep.
Well, and I ultimately think it stems from, love, love your neighbor as yourself sort of thing. If you're doing that and if you're living that out and acting that out, that is ultimately going to come out in you serving others and loving them. And, like in James says, faith without works is dead. And so I think JP is touching on so many like very solid points of how to live a Christian life, love others, be of service, and pray. And if you're gonna do all those things, I think your walk is going to be very fruitful.
I agree.
Well, guys, I think that's kind of the end of the video. The main points we want to hit. His end part was kind of about changing your mind, and I think we already discussed that in the beginning. But awesome. So happy he put that video out there.
Mm-hmm.
Props to him for using his platform to spread that word, that mission.
I think that is his platform's point. It always has been, was to try to spread some bit of truth through humor, through satire. And that's always been his kind of mission. And I think it falls in line perfectly with what he's been doing. And he's finally noticing a lot of his audience is the same way. There are they're doing the same journey he is. So why not be avant-garde with what's happening to him? It's just going to give him more power. It's going to give him more in the end. I'm looking forward to the collabs between Babylon B and JP now. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm sure it will happen.
Cool. You're here.
Well, I guess should we close in some prayer?
Yeah, let's close in prayer. You want to lead, Mike?
Yeah, Lord, thank you so much for this conversation today. Thank you that we could test out this new streaming setup, Lord, and that we could have this conversation about JP and his faith journey. And so thankful for him and his willingness to share it with the world. And we wish him well, God. We pray for his protection, as I'm sure the enemy will be attacking. And thank you so much. In your name, Jesus. Amen.